over our main topics of the day, and our main topics, we really only have one to cover, but the thing is, if you want to get a main question or a main topic on the show, all you have to do is send me an email at GottaLoveThemMovies@gmail.com and send me your questions, send me your comments. If there's a bit of news that I forgot to cover, if there was something that just wasn't on my radar, what shows are you watching? What movies are you looking forward to? Send me an email at GottaLoveThemMovies@gmail.com, and we can open up the discussion, just like we're about to open up the Gotta Love Them Movies mailbag right now. All right, guys, we are opening up that Gotta Love Them Movies mailbag, and our first email and only email of the day comes to us from Matthew, a longtime viewer of the show. Matthew from Leeds in the UK. He asks, why are there so few Indiana Jones movies? It seems, my cat is meowing. So if you're wondering what that sound is, she's trying to get out of the room. Excuse me. Why? It's a professional show, right? So Matthew asks, why are there so few Indiana Jones movies? It seems like a great franchise universe. The Crystal Skull was not great, but in the beginning they alluded to a bunch of stuff he did in World War II, and there could be loads to explore. Did Harrison Ford hate the role like Han Solo? Also, when Hollywood gets back to it, would you want it rebooted or a sequel? And who would you want to play Indiana Jones? So Matthew, thank you so much for the question. This is jam-packed full of a lot of questions, a lot of information, and a lot of things to, kind of pull apart and unpack here. There's, in my personal opinion, from my purview, from the way that I see things, there's a few reasons as to why there are so few Indiana Jones movies. So first of all, let me go through and address a few of these things. You're talking about Crystal Skull. Yes, we all acknowledge it's a garbage movie. I don't think there's a soul on the planet who enjoys this movie. And if you are one of the people who wants to jump down to the comment section below and prove me wrong, well, I'm going to tell you, you're wrong. Crystal Skull is a terrible movie. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you like it, you have my sympathies. Anyway, but you are right. Like, in the opening sequence, or like somehow at some point, yes, they do reference all the stuff that he did through World War II. That could have been really cool and interesting to explore. I would argue the opposite. One of the things that Crystal Skull didn't do it for me was they switched genres. It no longer was a 1930s pulp action movie. Now it became a 1950s sci-fi movie. That genre just did not, combined with Indiana Jones, that did not work for me. And had they gone to more of a World War II aspect of it, more kind of like war, and I don't know how Indiana Jones would have been a spy in World War II. I mean, they could have found a way. I just don't think that genre would have worked for me. So yes, there's loads they could have explored. I'm glad they didn't, because again, that genre, it didn't quite do it for me. Did Harrison Ford hate the role of Indiana Jones? No, he wasn't. Like at the end of Empire Strikes Back, Harrison Ford wanted Han Solo to die in the third film. He thought, it's not that he hated Han Solo, he just didn't see, like, why does Han Solo need to stick around? That didn't make any sense to the actor Harrison Ford. So he thought it made more sense for Han Solo to die in Return of the Jedi. They didn't kill him off, so when they eventually got around to doing Episode 7, that's why Harrison Ford died in that film, to give it, the emotional gravitas that it needed, and it was like a good arc conclusion for his character. When Hollywood gets back to it, would you want it rebooted or a sequel? And who do you want to play Indiana Jones? We'll get back to that in a few minutes, but first I want to address your very first question, Matthew. Why are there so few Indiana Jones movies? Well, first of all, you can see I have it listed 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have another 5 and 6 later on. Bullet point number 1, Indiana Jones is a great character, but it's not a great universe. Let's think about this for a second. Indiana Jones is an explorer. He is an archaeologist. He's a teacher. granted, there's a lot of artifacts and a lot of things. It's kind of very Tomb Raidery, but the world is not that expansive. Let's compare and contrast this to Star Wars, right? Star Wars is a great universe, and while yes, it has great characters in that universe, there are so many other stories to be told that take place in the literal universe. In the Indiana Jones realm or sphere, there's really only one interesting factor, and that is Indiana Jones himself, that keeps us coming back. Larken, before we move on to bullet points 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1,000, do you have a different insight to this, or do you kind of feel on a similar level that it's not a great universe, but he's a great character? Do you have a different insight?
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly it. I mean, he is so, as you point out, he's so tied to that very specific and really well drawn um, moment of the first three movies, and we really see that world of the 30s, and that um, that it's wonderful, and it's right there, but there's nowhere else to go. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about Star Wars as well, and how there's so many places you can literally take that story, and it doesn't feel the
I
same.
agree. Bullet point number 2. Where do we go? There we go. Bullet point number 2. As I caress my own idol of the was it the fertility god idol. Gah! This is how much I love Indiana Jones, you guys. I spent money on this. It's a toy prop. That's how much I love Indiana Jones. All right, so bullet point number 2. Steven Spielberg completed the trilogy. He never intended it. He never intended for the franchise to continue. If you look at, the end of Last Crusade, the last shot is of all the protagonists of the film literally riding off into the sunset. They're all on their horsebacks. They ride off into the sunset. It's essentially the curtain going down on the franchise, on the series, on the character. And they never intended for any other films to be made. Steven Spielberg has been very open about this. He's given interview after interview after interview as to why he put that shot in. That's how he closed it off. Because, series is over. Why do we need more Indiana Jones movies? It's a perfect trilogy. I would actually argue that Back to the Future is a perfect trilogy, and this is also a perfect trilogy. But yeah, I mean, they never intended any other films to be made after this, so why invest the time to do that? Larken, how do you feel on the subject?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first three, they stand so perfectly as a unit. Um, my nostalgic side does sort of wonder if history had gone differently for River Phoenix. Might there have been room for a prequel or some kind of storytelling in that world? But when we lost him as an actor, uh, that I, that also seemed to kind of foreclose any
It's true.
options there.
Bullet point number 3. There, like multiple scripts had been written of a fourth Indiana Jones movie, but long before Crystal Skull came along, there were multiple scripts, but none of them saw the light of day. And I would like to present a few. Chris Columbus wrote a script, a full-length script for Indiana Jones and the Monkey King. Jeb Stewart and Jeffrey Boehm wrote a script for Indiana Jones and the Saucerman from Mars. That sounds terrible. That sounds terrible. But hey, it's a movie that they wrote. Frank Darabont. If you're not familiar with Frank Darabont, huge in the horror film. He's had his fingers all over The Walking Dead. In fact, he was the one who actually kind of helped create The Walking Dead for its television cinematic approach. Frank Darabont is huge in his special effects. He uses practical effects. Great storyteller, great behind the camera. He's fantastic. Anyway, Frank Darabont wrote Indiana Jones and the City of Gods. Diane Thomas, who wrote the script for Romancing the Stone, wrote Indiana Jones and the Haunted Mansion, which was one of the most interesting Indiana Jones adventures that people were talking about, like, online. It's essentially Indiana Jones going into a haunted castle. Who doesn't want to see Indiana Jones inside of a haunted castle? That sounds awesome. In fact, the script was so interesting and so good that they took elements of that. That's why in Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's why they put that whole castle sequence in. That's where he found his father, Henry Jones, being held by the Nazis. He was in that kind of, like, it wasn't a haunted castle, but they had those castle-y elements. There were attempts essentially to make a fourth Indiana Jones movie in the mid 90s, and just none of them came to fruition because the scripts weren't good enough, or it wasn't the right time, or everybody was doing something else. Larken, I'm gonna throw it to you. Have you heard of any of these other scripts?
I have not. I agree with you. Was it the Spaceman or the Man from Mars?
That sounds
No, that should
terrible.
never. That's no, terrible. The '90s were not a moment when we were doing this whole
Mm-hmm.
franchise thing. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned perfect trilogies. They were usually in this exact moment of mid to late '80s, rounding out possibly at the very late '80s or maybe early '90s. I don't think the appetite was there in I'm thinking about what was popular in the mid '90s. This is the era of reality
Yeah, we had
bites,
a lot of
and
independent films, like you said, Reality Bites, or
yeah,
where was it? Like Mission Impossible was not a franchise yet; it was just a standalone film. You know,
yeah, and even that, what was that,
that was
'98 or so? So I mean,
'96. That
there's
was '96.
okay. I was in
Yeah, like
college. I don't
Empire
really know,
Records.
but right, yeah, there was a
The
lot more kind
Crow.
of just it felt yeah, which was a great movie actually. Um, yeah, so I feel like there wasn't fans weren't hungering for it at that point, like we see people really just craving those
It's
familiar
true.
characters now.
Bullet point number 4: scheduling conflicts. The actors, the writers, the directors, they have to take work when they can get it. Like I said before, Steven Spielberg ended the trilogy with, the sun going down. That was supposed to be it. That was supposed to be the end of it. They you can't sit around and wait for, okay, well, we need to make this happen. Ryan Reynolds is a great example of this. He wanted to make the Deadpool movie, and now, in hindsight, well, yeah, of course, it's an incredible film, highest grossing R-rated film of all time, period, until it was beaten by Deadpool 2. So there you go. But until then, it took him 11 years to get that movie made. He had he not taken any work in that previous 11 years, he never would have had it made. He wouldn't have any street cred. Nobody would respect him. Nobody would trust him with the material, and it would not have happened. So Steven Spielberg had to take other work. Like, even if they were passionate about getting a fourth film made, you still need to do other things. I don't know, who knows? We may not have gotten Jurassic Park. Maybe we wouldn't have had Schindler's List. Maybe we wouldn't have had War of the Worlds, and maybe that wouldn't have been a bad thing. But the point being is that, everyone had to go off and continue working. George Lucas was making his prequel trilogy, which was, but still, he was working. He was doing his thing. Harrison Ford, doing what? Presumed Innocent. I think he did Witness in '89, so it was right around the same time that Crusade came out. Presumed Innocent. The Fugitive was huge for him. Hey, 6 Days, 7 Nights. What a great movie. I'm being completely facetious. But yeah, everybody has to go out and continue working. Larken, do you see it any other way?
Yeah, no, that's that. And when I think about Spielberg, I remember that right after this, the Last Crusade and Jurassic Park, then you've got Schindler's List,
Oh,
Saving Private
yeah.
Ryan, on the side, not the blockbuster, but I mean, I think we see in him a real interest in telling very
Yeah.
different kinds of stories than what he had. So yeah, I would imagine that Spielberg himself, his interest wasn't there, and I think we see that too with Harrison Ford taking all of those very dramatic kind of. It's still action, but it's just a
It's true.
different turn for him.
You have to
So yeah, I
stretch
think
those other
these
muscles.
folks
Like,
want to
try
do
something different. Why? I get it. Like, Chris Evans. Where did I go? Where am I? There I am. Chris Evans. Loves playing Captain America, but he wants to try something else. Like, why do you want to keep pounding the same thing again and again and again? Granted, it works and people like you for it, but it doesn't. George Reeves. I will point to George Reeves. He's the perfect example of this. The not the first on-screen Superman we ever saw, but I think he was the second in the original television show. He played Superman for what, 7 seasons, 8 seasons, something like that. And did he kill himself? Who knows? That's a huge Hollywood mystery. Anyway, all of it is to say is that when you get typecast, sometimes you just kind of want to try something new. Get out of your type.
Yeah, I love you mentioned Chris Evans too. This notion that now, if someone was making a movie that they thought might be a trilogy, you would get the actors a contract that was 10 years or however many pictures or whatever. I don't think that was this industry standard back then. I mean, it's interesting to think about 1980s
Yeah.
era Spielberg he was still scrappy at that point. This wasn't the mega
It's
complex
true. I
that
mean,
we have now.
he was definitely the star of filmmakers with hits like Jaws and Close Encounters.
Yeah.
Drive? No. Oh, what was that move? Was it Drive? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Anyway, about the rogue truck that's like following this other guy. Anyway, yeah, he was a star filmmaker, but yeah, you're right. Gotta take work where you can get it, you know? Bullet point number 5. By the time they made Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones, the character of Indiana Jones, had already reached an untouchable cult status. And when I say untouchable, it's this idea that it's just like any other, like, passionately loved film that has its fan base. Star Wars falls into this category. Like, obviously, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future. There are certain films and certain properties that are so beloved that there's no way that after a certain period of time goes by, there's no way that anyone could ever live up to those expectations. Like, how many years? So it was 1989. Last Crusade came out, and then it was 2008 when Crystal Skull came out. So that's what, 19 years? 19 years in between Indiana Jones films. We have all these people online clamoring like, oh, Indiana Jones is the greatest. And the more time that goes by without a new installment, like say Marvel. Okay, cool. If they had ended it at Avengers and then you wait 10 years to do the next Avengers film, it's going to be scrutinized so much more harshly than it would if it came out like 2 years later, which Marvel's been putting them out every year. Maybe not this year. We'll see. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying. So like the more time that goes by with a beloved franchise that you don't keep adding to that franchise, it builds this mystique. It has this kind of rich cult status behind it that, you know, how dare you mess with my classic, blah, 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 whatever. And with Crystal Skull, I think one of the big reasons why Crystal Skull didn't work, there's a lot of reasons why Crystal Skull didn't work, but one of them is that how do you get your audience to accept this this character that, you know, your character has to live up to your audience expectations? How do you do that? That's so hard to do. Yeah, Larken, I'm going to throw it to you. What is it about audience expectation that, like, can it be overcome? Like,
Yeah, not after, what was that, 18 years? No. Yeah, there's no way with that much intervening space and people having their own sort of fan fiction or whatever. That's almost an impossible
and you
task.
bring up a
Yeah. Yeah.
great point. Fan fiction. How many books, how many stories, how many comic books, novels have been written, like short stories about video games about Indiana Jones himself? We have all this other content which actually goes to prove, hey, we want more, we want more, we want more. But when you're the one controlling it and it needs to hit a certain mark, that's intimidating. That's really hard to do. So the last point that I have right here, number 6, Lucasfilm, and this is number 1 and number 6, I think, are the most important parts in my list here. Um, Lucasfilm doesn't know what to do with the character. Like, like, yeah. I mean, when he's of untouchable cult status, and your main actor is 78 years old, your titular character, this year he's 78 years old right now. Next year, I mean, we don't even have a script for Indiana Jones 5. Lawrence Kasdan, I'm sorry, Lawrence Kasdan's son, Robert Kasdan? I can't think of his name. Uh,
I was gonna say,
I'm sorry, say
but
it
I don't
again.
think that's right. I was gonna say
No.
Jacob, but I don't think that's right either.
Son of
Yeah.
Kasdan, Kasdanson,
Ah.
Mr. Kasdanson. He was going to pen the script, and then it went back to David Koepp, who's an incredible script writer. He wrote Jurassic Park. He pretty much written most everything for Steven Spielberg. He's dropped out now. Directorial duties have gone from Steven Spielberg to James Mangold. Which is really interesting. James Mangold just having done Ford v Ferrari, Academy Award nominee for Best Picture. Also done The Wolverine and Logan. I mean, really, he knows how to make a good movie. So all of this is to say, I don't actually think Lucasfilm knows how to handle the character of Indiana Jones anymore. That was George Lucas's job. And then once the year 1990 hit, George Lucas lost his mind and didn't know what to do anymore in terms of writing or producing or filmmaking, as evidenced by his horrible sequel or prequel trilogy. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think am I off the mark a little bit on this, Larken, or do you think that Lucasfilm really doesn't know how to handle the character?
No, I think that's exactly right. If there was, sorry, it's after school. If
You kids go back to
if
class.
they like if they knew what to do with this character, if they had a bunch of creative people with a really clear story to tell or something they wanted to see the character do, they would have done it. At this point, it's just that sense of, oh, people want something, so we have to give them something. But yeah, I think any attempt at this point is going to be misguided, I fear.
I agree. I agree. Anyway, so all of those reasons. Oh, where did my? Sorry, I am so unprofessional right now. There we go. All of these reasons are, I don't think Lucasfilm knows what to do with the character. Indiana Jones is a great character, but he doesn't live in a great universe. There's not a lot of tangential. Is that it? Tangential.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of tangential stories that he can go off and adventure in, or rather have other characters adventure in. Spielberg only intended this to be a trilogy. Like, he ended it with a trilogy, boom, that was it. And so once you bring the curtain down, how do you bring the curtain back up? There had been multiple attempts, but it just, none of them worked. There were scheduling conflicts between all the actors and the writers and directors. Indiana Jones is kind of an untouchable cult status, and Lucasfilm, I contend, doesn't know how to handle the character. So those are my ideas. Those are my thoughts. That's kind of what I've compiled. Why aren't there more Indiana Jones films? Now, if we can go back to the original question that Matthew asked right at the very end, would you want to see this rebooted or a sequel? And if it was rebooted, who would you want to see play Indiana Jones? I have a few thoughts about this. I think in terms of reboot or sequel, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters whether you reboot the franchise or you make it a sequel for now. I think... I don't know. Larkin, let me throw it to you. Would you rather see this rebooted or would you rather see a sequel?
So I wonder, and this might be a dodge, but I wonder if, for all these reasons, any kind of reinvention of the story wouldn't be a movie, but might be more appropriate for a serialized kind of,
Kind of like what
TV
they
kind
did
of
with the
thing.
young
Um,
Chronicles of Indiana Jones, or the Young Adventures, something like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm still kind of toying with this idea that we did get a sense of what might have happened during the 40s or during World War II or whatever, and that kind of thing might work in an episodic world. Um,
I think
but
that would be really
I
cool.
haven't really
I think
thought
that would be
about
really
that.
cool.
But that seems more possible than a movie about that time period.
Now, if
So,
they were to recast, going back
I,
to Matthew's question, if they were to recast, is there any particular actor that you would like to see play the character of Indiana Jones, or would you like to gender bend the character, or like how would I don't know? What do you think?
yeah, yeah. That's really cool. I feel like, and this might have been on Twitter. I don't know. I feel like somebody was pitching a version of Indiana Jones with Janelle Monáe as Indy, and
Ooh.
and I have no idea if I just pulled that out of nowhere, but that sounds kind of awesome. But you really do need someone with her sort of really
Okay.
edgy sex
Yeah.
appeal, um, which is what Harrison Ford had
Yeah.
too, and with the
Oh
sense
yeah.
of someone who's not the classic, you know, um, you know, beautiful, whatever, but someone who just has that charisma that everybody's like,
Larkin, you can't see it right now, but
yeah,
I pulled up a picture of Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, and I'm pointing to it. He's mwah, like total sex appeal. That
yeah.
man right there.
And I think in a similar but obviously different way, Janelle Monáe has the
I think that'd be really
same
cool.
quality. Uh,
Um,
so yeah,
this might be
so yeah.
too much of a nail on the head. This name has been thrown around a lot, especially a few years ago when they were talking about rebooting or doing Indiana Jones 5 or whatever. Previously when they were talking about Indy 5. But Star Lord himself. I think
Mm.
why is his name not coming to me? Chris
Yeah, Chris,
oh,
one
you
of
know
the
what I'm talking about.
Chris's.
Oh
Yeah.
man, this is the worst. Chris Pratt, thank you.
Pratt.
Yes, Chris Pratt.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think Chris Pratt would make an awesome Indiana Jones. He's charismatic. He's fun. He knows how to do action. Thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World. He's a decent leading man. He's a little bumbly. Indiana Jones isn't
Mhm.
bumbly. Um, but I don't know. I think that could be a really fun, interesting flavor. If they, depending on how they write the character, he doesn't have to be bumbly. He just tends to play more bumbly
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I definitely see him as more of like a slightly goofy, but in a ultimately
Yeah.
winsome way. He doesn't seem to have much edge to him, which I actually think the actor does. But seeing his characters, he
Sure.
doesn't seem
Yeah.
very edgy.
So anyway, guys, I think all of those reasons, I mean, we kind of hashed this out to death a little bit. This is why I don't think we're getting a lot of Indiana Jones movies. Indiana Jones is one of those characters that is so beloved in the public eye. I have my own golden idol here, for my own personal love of the character of Indiana Jones. But I also don't think that he's the type of character that lends himself to having more and more and more story. Not at least not as many stories as what we see in Star Wars, right? I mean, yeah, we could most definitely see him, continue on with adventures and stuff like that. Crystal Skull it was an abomination. It did not work whatsoever. There were one, maybe two kind of fun moments in the movie, but that does not make it a fun movie or a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I just don't see it. I say I don't see it happening. I mean, obviously it is happening. It's going to happen. At some point, we will see other permutations of the Indiana Jones character. It is going to happen. It's just a matter of when, and it's a matter of finding the right story and the right creative team to make this happen. So anyway, do you guys have a different thought or opinion on Indiana Jones? Why haven't we seen more movies over the years? Is there something that I'm completely leaving out? Is there something that I haven't gone into enough in terms of explanation? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys? Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you like this video, click like. If you really like this video, click subscribe. And if you really, really like this video, click share. Because that is exactly what this dinosaur would want you to do. Roar, roar, roar!